Hawaii is so distant from the continents that metalwork did not arrive in the archipelago until Western explorers began arriving in 1778. Despite this, the Hawaiians still built a thriving agricultural society so unique that people are still fighting for it today. Hawaii is famous today as an exotic vacation place, with its beautiful beaches and tropical weather. Hawaii can seem like a timeless destination. However, the islands have seen their own issues come and go, and colonization was one of the biggest modern influences on the archipelago. The arrival of Europeans destroyed the traditional island life that had flourished for centuries, replacing it with a Western way of life that continues to clash with the remnants of the traditional culture. Hawaii didn't always used to be like this. Hawaii used to be home to many different groups that were similar enough to survive together and diverse enough that the tribes were still unique. Life in Hawaii was very different before colonialism, but running through their history is the same themes of family, conflict, and home that color human history regardless of time or place. How long have people lived in Hawaii? Compared with the rest of the world, people have not lived on the islands of Hawaii for very long. Historians believe that Hawaiian history began as early as 400 CE, but it took a few hundred years for the population to mature and settle. Part of the reason it took people so long to reach Hawaiian shores is how isolated the archipelago is. People needed a particular skill set to even get to the islands in the time before electric motors and GPS. Luckily, the Polynesian people were expert ocean navigators. The Polynesians were a group of seamen who built many different settlements on islands across the Pacific Ocean. Some historians even believe that they reached the coasts of South America, although they are still debating this. Regardless of if they ever arrived in South America, their influence is evident across much of the Pacific Ocean, especially the area referred to as the Polynesian Triangle. They sailed with large canoes that had everything they needed to survive for months, including live plants and animals. And the people used wind directions, currents, and the stars to navigate the vast ocean. They even followed birds on their migration routes to find their way to new islands. These seafarers built small settlements on many of the islands they discovered. But because they mostly stayed on the edges of the islands, they did not encroach significantly on the indigenous people already there. Their main interactions with indigenous tribes were most likely through trade. These ancient people traded goods and products with inland groups and other Polynesian settlements. Historians speculate that the Polynesians desired to explore the Pacific Ocean because they had a rapidly growing population. The small settlements could only support so many people, so once a settlement grew too large to be sustainable, some of the people would set off to find a new place to live. In this way, the Polynesians became a prominent culture across the Pacific Ocean. Still, Hawaii was so isolated that it took the Polynesians centuries to find it. The first people to arrive in Hawaii landed on Kauai. This is the most southernmost point of Hawaii, or the Big Island. The Polynesians established their settlements and settled down as farmers and fishers, in addition to their sea explorations. They soon found the land to be bountiful. Some historians argue that there were people in Hawaii when the Polynesians arrived, because Hawaiian mythology has a group of people called the Menehune. Even though the mythology includes these people, most historians believe that the Polynesians were the first people to settle in Hawaii. They soon populated all of the major Hawaiian islands and were joined by the Tahitians in 1000 CE. The two groups merged, creating a Hawaiian culture all their own. How did people live their daily lives before colonization? For hundreds of years, Hawaii was virtually unknown to the rest of the world. There is some evidence that the people stayed in contact with their Polynesian roots, but the distance was so great that the Hawaiians developed a separate way of life. There is no known number of Hawaiian residents during this time in their history, but some historians estimate that there were about 300,000 people throughout the archipelago by 1778. All these people did not live as one country. Instead, they lived in many different tribes that were constantly interacting with each other. The Hawaiian tribes shared many similarities with other Polynesian tribes at the time, and one of the most significant similarities was the basic class structure. Each tribe was led by a ruling class or a ruling royal family, and these ruling classes tended to intermarry to keep the bloodline pure, while also practicing polygyny. These leaders made the decisions for the tribes and expected everyone else to meet them with respect and even prostration. Royalty was treated with such respect that people could not even enter the high chief's house without permission. The high chief also had a royal court that consisted of lower nobles waiting on him, and storytellers, musicians, and guards. Music and poetry were important to their society. The musicians performed with nose flutes, string instruments, and drums, and people listened to storytellers recite poems. The most popular stories were the ones that have been passed down from generation to generation. The Hawaiians did not have a writing system, so this was one of the main ways they remembered their mythology and history. Under the nobility, a complex caste system assigned everyone a place in their communal society. The second group in society consisted of priests, shamans, professional artisans, and healers. Craftsmanship in Hawaii was stunning, and one of the most impressive parts is they did not work with metal. These ancient people did not have access to metal ore, so their innovations used resources they had, like shells, bones, and stones. One of the most revered crafts in ancient Hawaii was boat making. They specialized in canoes. Boat making was so revered that there were specific religious rituals throughout the entire process of building one, starting with selecting the correct koa tree. Canoes varied in length, with the longest one ever measured being 107 feet long. Boat makers would carefully carve out the canoe and then decide whether or not to attach a sail. Some boats had sails, but some boats only had paddles. Regardless of how the canoe was completed, it served the Hawaiian people well, becoming an integral part of their culture and survival on the islands. The third social group was made up of ordinary people. This was the largest group, and much of their focus centered around providing for their families. They lived in houses made from carved wooden frames and thatched with leaves. While this may sound primitive, the people wove patterns into their roofs and used different types of wood. The decorative choices displayed a person's wealth, skill, and class in society, so the ancient Hawaiians took their houses very seriously. It was usually warm enough that people did not wear many clothes, and some went without clothing completely. When they used clothes, they made their fabric from bark cloth, which usually came from the paper mulberry tree. The bark was stripped from the tree, cleaned, and then beaten out to soften it enough to wear. After allowing it to dry in the sun, the people would dye the clothing and create intricate patterns on them, demonstrating an artistic flair in their everyday lives. Art was a prevalent part of their lives, and they infused creativity into almost everything. Although chiefs and nobility would be clothed with feathers to indicate their class, colors and decorated fabric were not reserved for royalty. Especially when compared with other cultures, the ancient Hawaiians built a culture filled with expressive art that they carved, dyed, and constructed everywhere they could. Another big part of Hawaiian life centered around agriculture, and the islands were a perfect place for farming because they were both warm and moist. In addition to the ocean, plenty of freshwater lakes and streams were ideal for crops. The soil was rich from the volcanic sediment that would bring nutrients down the mountainsides. Although the Polynesians had brought some of their own plants, like the coconut and the paper mulberry tree, the Hawaiian diet was based on the taro plant, yams, and marine animals. The archipelago is a maritime oasis in the middle of the ocean, and many types of fish, mollusks, and coral visit or live around it. Agriculture in ancient Hawaii was reliable, and the people could grow enough food to sustain a growing population. Like much of Hawaiian culture, agriculture was a family activity. The ancient Hawaiians had a value called ohana. Ohana places importance on the family, which could be as small as one's direct family unit and as large as the whole tribe. Everyone worked together for the good of the group, which is one of the reasons the ancient Hawaiians were able to thrive. Even though the tribe operated as a large family, the class system still led to differentiation amongst the people. The commoners had little to no property rights, often shifting around as tribes fought with each other over land and resources. The nobility owned the land, one of Hawaii's most valuable commodities, and land boundaries determined wealth, authority, and leadership. The desire for land and the cultural connection with one's tribe led to tribal tensions that sometimes erupted into wars that displaced people, dethroned chiefs, and made the islands far more volatile than we might think this ocean paradise would be. Why did the different tribes clash with each other? It's important to note that the tribes were not always at odds with each other. Many of the tribes traded freely, creating a vibrant economy and allowing everyone to get the resources they needed. There was a complex social structure to ensure everyone had enough water and farmland, leaving the archipelago reasonably well organized. However, as life continued in Hawaii, the governmental style became increasingly destructive as chiefs sought more land and power. The Hawaiians also had a concept called mana, which centers around one's honor. Insulting someone's mana was highly discouraged and usually met with retaliation. So later chiefs would often go to war to reclaim their mana or take revenge on someone who had insulted them. Interestingly, although the tribes appear to have engaged in conflict regularly, historians have found little evidence of a special warrior class. There were trained military guards to protect royalty, but the ancient Hawaiian tribes did not have standing armies. Instead, most people were trained in how to use weapons and occasionally drilled in groups to learn battle techniques. They used typical ancient weapons, spears, clubs, and slings. However, they did not use shields like many other ancient cultures. Instead, they became experts at dodging and parrying attacks. Most of the battles in ancient Hawaii occurred in open fields, although ambushes were also common. Sea fighting was rare because of the materials, labor, and preparation needed to succeed. Sadly, their culture could not stay in isolation forever. The Hawaiians were introduced to the world in 1778 when James Cook discovered the archipelago. At the time, there was an intense conflict amongst the tribes, which allowed the Europeans the foothold they needed. Soon, the wheels of colonization that had already subdued most of the world turned to Hawaii. Although some of the indigenous culture has survived, and many artifacts remain for us to admire today, the islands and the people would never be the same again. Life before colonization had not been perfect, but it had been unique and perfectly human, showing us that we can make beauty and art an integrated part of our lives. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about Hawaiian history, check out our book, Hawaiian History, a captivating guide to the history of the Big Island, starting from ancient Hawaii to the present. It's available as an ebook and paperback. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.